Hello and welcome to the Media Club. I'm your host, Matt Deegan. In the club today, rumours abound that Channel 4 plan to invest in indies as part of its in-house production arm. And that's just as ITV slashes its budget for daytime. Broadcast senior reporter Heather Fallon tells us what it all means. Also on the programme, Gary Lineker is sent off the BBC after a controversial social post. Did it all have to end like this? TV critic and media writer Scott Bryan looks at what the corporation could have done differently. All that plus in the Audio Network Media Quiz, we're going to be playing Matchmaker. That's all happening in this edition of the Media Club. Come on in. So welcome back to the Media Club. Before we get into the big stories of the week, Heather, thank you for joining us for the first time.
Thank you.
I've been busy laminating your membership card out in the office.
It's an honour.
But who else would you like to add into the club this week?
So the person I'd like to bring into the club is someone who I think has not only had a good week, but a good career in media. That's John Whiston, who was the ITV Managing Director of Continuing Drama and head of ITV North for the last almost 30 years. And during that time, he's had such a big contribution to Coronation Street in Emmerdale. He was recognised in an adjournment debate in the House of Commons for his contribution to their 60th anniversary, which happened in 2020. And not only that, but he was also really pivotal in a lot of schemes. So I made a note that he was behind the Original Voices initiative at ITV. That's something that welcomes writers from diverse backgrounds to write on soaps. And he was also the person that launched the Tony Warren Bursary. And that allows a Northern student to have the opportunity to go to a drama school. So I think people who make those opportunities for diverse talent to come in through the door should always be celebrated. So I think John Whiston would be a nice entry to the club. Yes,
a good new member. It's sort of an amazing career, and to sort of stay at the top on looking after things that's so important for ITV is pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think his full career spans even longer than that, but 30 years at ITV is not to be dismissed.
And Scott, hello.
Hello, you all right? Lovely to see you.
Yes, lovely to see you too. Who would you like to add to our club membership list?
So I want to add Rose Ayling-Ellis, who is currently in the ITV drama Code of Silence. She's actually been, in a fair few places quite recently, of course. Winning Strictly a few years back. She was also in Reunion, which is one of my favourite dramas of the year so far. She was in that. She's also been a part of the Paralympics coverage too. And in Code of Silence, it's a really kind of, at first, quite absurd thriller, but it's brilliant in the fact that she is brought on, she works in a canteen, she's brought on to a police intelligence procedural, which is a fictional drama, because she can lip read. And essentially, she's then thrown into these sort of covert intelligence operations. And it's because I think somebody wasn't there at work one day, so she's just naturally given this massive promotion. But she's fantastic. And I think you learn an awful lot, along with Reunion, I think, about what it means to be deaf. And the use of British Sign Language is also evident throughout, which is, I think, fantastic and such an important move for TV. But it's also, I think, like you're learning, but it's not feeling like you're being lectured to.
Yes.
First and foremost, they're great dramas.
Where can people watch it?
Well, Reunion is currently on BBC iPlayer, and Code of Silence, you can watch all episodes on ITVX.
Lovely. Channel 4 is entering the investment game with the launch of its Creative Investment Fund. It did this on Wednesday. This was also the launch of its annual report. Scott said they're not going to have the deep pockets of ITV and ITV Studios, but the report said they've got cash reserves of 111 million quid, so there is some money for them to invest.
Yes, but I mean, sometimes they've had that money, I think, sat sometimes for a long while, and they've not necessarily touched it either. I think some people have been picking apart, I think James Warrington at The Telegraph, picking apart about how actually content spend, if you look at it in light of inflation, is at the lowest it's been for quite some time. I would say annual reports are a tricky thing because it looks back at the previous year, at the previous financial year, whilst that might not actually be the current state of where things are now. And I found that I was at a Channel 4 upfronts maybe 2-3 months ago, and it was very much Ian Katz being like, hi, we've got money now. And them saying, look, we're investing in comedy, we're investing in dramas throughout the year. things are looking up. You can count on us now. Indies, we're sorry about everything that's happened. The economy's turned a corner. So I think to then read quite negative, quite gloomy figures being said about Channel 4, I can see, obviously it has been a very difficult time and remains so for the TV industry. But I don't know whether that's exactly where we are now. I'm sort of intrigued what you think.
Heather, are Indies excited about the potential of investment from Channel 4, or is it sort of competition?
Well, I think the response from a few indies that I know, my colleagues especially have been speaking to, was that a lot of this is coming from the Indie Growth Fund, seems to be the indies that are kind of being primarily targeted. But I don't know how many of them were necessarily aware that this was something that was going to happen until the announcement yesterday. And I know that John McVeigh at PACT has been quite vocal as well about the fact that they weren't fully consulted on it, and they have quite a few concerns about what in-house could mean for Channel 4 and the indie sector at large. One of the things that I think he pointed out was that because it's in-house and it's going to be at Channel 4, there is a potential that you've got all these developers that have immediate access to commissioners in an informal way, but still, there could be a bit of a canteen culture there.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of, whereas I guess similar to like ITV Studios versus the network, ITV Studios owning a lot of imprints and production companies, are Channel 4 going to build their own core in-house production arm, which they sort of suggest they are, but are maybe taking some first steps looking to invest in indies?
Yeah, and I think there are some great indies within what's currently the Growth Fund. Some of the ones that got mentioned were companies like Warp Films that made Adolescence. I'm sure they would love to have Adolescence indie on there. But it's hard to say at the moment what that's going to look like, but I think it's taking place from 2026 onwards, I'm sure more will be revealed.
Yes.
And also, I guess you wonder, because by then, I think Channel 4 would have changed quite a bit. Like Alex Mahon is on the way out. I would imagine Ian Katz, he's sort of hinted that he might no longer be a part of that too. So sort of you really wonder how the new age and the new leadership of Channel 4 will change things.
I mean, it would make sense that if the leadership changes, it happens at a time of big reorganisation at the channel, suddenly getting into the production world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I wasn't at the annual report, but my colleagues that were said that the atmosphere was quite jovial compared to the year previous, and I think maybe that's slightly because Alex and Ian kind of feel like they can relax a little bit because they know, Alex especially, that she's kind of moving on to somewhere else, so she can kind of
bit demob happy.
Exactly.
Scott, anything else you noticed from the annual report?
I think it's like an interesting sort of sense about where we are with the media industry so far, because I think, we're about to talk about it in regards to ITV. It sort of coincided with what's happening with ITV Daytime. So I think I've been sensing, even though it continues to be really hard in terms of the lack of available work, commissions still seem to be quite far down, particularly in that bit post-pandemic, that actually 2025 to 2026 looks to be much better. Well, not much better. It looks to be better, I think it's a better term of phrase, than it was this time last year. So then to have kind of a sense of, okay, things are picking up again, to then have the whammy of the ITV news on the same morning, I think, same hour, I think it sort of shows that actually things might not be heading in the right direction entirely. Yeah,
well, let's come on to that in a sec. The thing I noticed, so 40% of their revenues at Channel 4 are non-linear.
Yeah.
Which seemed pretty, I saw that and instantly thought that's pretty high.
Yeah, and 30% of that I think is purely from digital tax revenues, and I think that was something that stood out to me as well, was that they really put themselves out there as saying that we are going to be the first streamer broadcaster, and they've put so much into digital. So there was some positive in that you could see that they really are making a lot of gains in their digital investment, and it is starting to kind of show up for them now. Their YouTube is doing incredibly well. 4.0 seems to be growing incredibly well.
Yeah,
as
so
well.
Channel 4.0 is their sort of more Gen Z, youthy programs on YouTube thing. Thinking about ITV, you mentioned it there, Scott. Big cuts to the daytime schedule. What are the changes?
So quite a few at the same time, really. I think viewers will notice it from 2026, from January 2026. So essentially,
that's quite soon.
Quite soon, yeah.
Yes.
Actually, I've got booked you then. That's thanks for that. Cheers, Matt. Thanks a lot. So essentially, 220 out of 440 staff who work across programs, across ITV daytime programs, will lose their jobs. So it's a very sort of tough situation. But I think it's one of those moments in which viewers will notice things in front of a screen changing. I think noticeably it's no longer going to be from TV Centre, which is quite notable because ITV have been there with their daytime slates since, I think, pretty much since the BBC largely left there 10 years ago.
It's pretty much like an ITV Studios operation now if you go to TV Centre.
Which
so
always
much comes from there.
Hurts your head because a part of you goes, but it's the BBC. And no, it's Soho House and houses none of us can afford. But anyway, so essentially Good Morning Britain is going to be moving to Gray's Inn Road. It's also going to be under the wing of ITN, which I think for any TV nerds who've been following the independence of morning breakfast news for ITV for decades. I mean, it really just show how things have changed. Lorraine, who is normally an all-year-round show, will be 30 weeks a year, also down to 30 minutes. Good Morning Britain will extend naturally into that space.
In weeks she's not on, they'll sort of run GMB longer.
Exactly, yes. And then there's also cutbacks on Loose Women. I think that This Morning remains intact, but also will be moving studios. So I think, like, several things, it's saddening, don't get me wrong, it is really saddening. It's also, I think, not surprising. I think generally, we've had 2 consecutive years of declining linear TV viewing, according to the Ofcom report. Notably, also, we've had a decline in older viewers too. So those
core
have been
part of ITV Daytime.
Core part, but also, those viewers who have been for decades relying on, as part of their routine, going on to daytime, now going on to streaming instead or catch up. But the most notable thing, I think, is if you go on to streaming, you're quite unlikely going to watch daytime shows. I think the genres of shows you naturally warm to are reality, are documentaries, are dramas, not so much daytime and discussion shows. So I think that's the challenges. ITV essentially said, look, we are going to be putting more money into drama, we're going to be putting more money into sport, and as a result daytime is going to sort of be pulled back. But I don't think it's over. I think it's just going to be a much more streamlined operation going forwards.
When I saw this, Heather, I was surprised at the scale of the change.
It is a pretty major overhaul. I think it was definitely in the ether for a while that they were going to do some level of kind of cost savings and just, make the whole thing more efficient. So within these changes, they're bringing the teams that make This Morning, Loose Women and Lorraine all together under one umbrella that will share the resources across. And then within that is part of the reason for the amount of cuts that they are doing. In terms of the people that I spoke to, they were very keen to stress that editorially, it shouldn't look too different to the viewers, because I think they don't want to necessarily completely overhaul what it actually looks like, but they've made it very clear, ITV, for a long time, that their priority areas, as you said, are dramas, those big reality entertainment offerings, and live sport, which is incredibly expensive. And I think when it comes to, is linear television struggling? Yes, in that the figures are declining, but I don't think they necessarily are saying this is the end of daytime TV, but they are saying, we need to focus on areas that are going to bring in bigger audiences. And actually, live sports is a really big commitment to linear television, because no one's going on ITVX to watch the football the next day. That's very much a linear proposition. But in order to make sure that they can do that, they do have to make cuts elsewhere. And it is a very difficult amount of cuts. It is almost half of their staff. So it's a pretty brutal overhaul.
Obviously, ITV is potentially up for sale itself. Is any aspect of this sort of fattening themselves up and being more attractive for an acquirer, or do you think it's more about their operational business?
It's hard to say, but I think it's the latter. I think it's more of a case of kind of looking at everything that they have and making the decision that ultimately this is something that can be cut. I mean, we announced last year that ITV was undergoing a major restructure then, and that they were doing these cost-cutting measures, and I think there were a series of job losses last year, and this just seems to be, unfortunately, a continuation of that. And, Channel 4 made a lot of redundancies last year as well. So I think it's more a statement of what is happening in TV industry rather than potentially getting ready for a sale, although I'm sure it probably helps.
Yes. Meanwhile, STV, the Scottish equivalent of ITV, is ramping up its production portfolio. A stake in Fan Club takes STV Studios investments to 22. Heather, Fan Club specialises in sort of branded content partnerships. Is that sort of a canny move by STV, try and sort of diversify a little bit?
I think it's definitely an interesting addition to STV Studios' portfolio. They don't have anything in that kind of branded digital specialism at the moment. And I think it's something that lots of places are looking into. I mean, we had a summit recently, and I was really surprised by how many people were coming and having a look at these like commissioners that were looking at digital offerings, and how a lot of brands are now looking at how they can make podcasts and how they can make digital content, because with commissions drying up, I think everyone is starting to look at, okay, if we can't get that Channel 4 commission anymore, how can we get something out there? How can we keep making content? So I think it is a very savvy move, and actually STV, I think, are a really exciting broadcaster to look at, because they are growing really exponentially and very quickly, and I think this move makes sense with what they're doing, what their ambitions are, because I think if you want to grow, every broadcaster has accepted that you have to get into digital now in order to do that.
So I just wonder with sort of branded content, kind of how viewers are receptive to this sort of thing, because in some cases I do think it can work. Like there's a podcast Dish, which is done by Waitrose, and it's very much saying the Waitrose, but it doesn't feel too kind of editorially guided. It's just
you don't think you're
Angela
watching
Hartnett.
an advert, you're watching listening to an interesting program,
and it feels like a sponsor more than anything else, and that's done with Nick Grimshaw and Angela Hartnett, and they've had a great array of celebrities on there. But I find that occasionally you get some things that are so branded and so corporate and so much like an advert. And I get it, like people need the money to go and make these programs, that I do think some viewers are put off. I think it is quite hard to know, because it's so dependent on them. But
it's quite a delicate balance.
It is.
Scott, do you think STV can compete with the sort of London big boys?
I mean, I think that we are continuing to have more money being spent in the regions and in various countries. I think STV has always positioned itself different than ITV, and sometimes it's not been a great relation to them. They're like two brothers who don't always get on, really. And I think looking at their strategy of putting their linear and digital business together makes perfect sense. Investing more in companies such as Rumpus Media, which has done a lot of programs with Joe Lycett, also makes perfect sense. So I think for me, like we were talking earlier about how with Channel 4, even if their annual report doesn't show it, I think it's starting to turn a corner. I sort of see as these results, these plans by indies, rather than just being wholehearted cuts, to be a sense, a litmus of how the overall industry is doing.
The other thing they announced was that they're going to launch a radio station.
You'll be all over that, I bet, when that launches.
So Bobby Hayne, who's sort of the big kind of broadcast boss, has a radio background, used to run Virgin Radio.
Yeah.
And they brought in Graham Bryce, who was COO of Bauer Media, who was always based in Scotland. So has that huge Scottish radio heritage. So the station is going to be targeting 35 to 54-year-olds based at their Glasgow HQ. I mean, it's sensible. A lot of TV promotion they can give a new product. I mean,
it can work because obviously, that self-promotion can work. But of course, we've only seen with like Lebedev, who tried to sort of launch a TV channel and alongside a free newspaper, worked for a bit, or sort of bought the Evening Standard, worked for a little bit, and then it didn't work. I'm sort of intrigued because I know I love asking you questions about audio because it's you're like to audio like I'm with TV. We've had such, I think, in the last few years, a lot of consolidation within radios, and then radio stations then having their own endless station like Radio X Oasis.
Yes.
Do you see this move by STV maybe a chance of actually putting more investment in new channels and originality rather than stripping things back?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the Scottish radio market's quite different to the kind of English radio market. So the networks that we're used to, the kind of Hearts and Capitals and all the shows coming from London, whilst the networks sometimes exist, they often have much more local programming in the nations. Things they don't have to do anymore. They choose, they global with Heart and Capital and their partners Communicore, they've added in local programming because Bauer's radio stations, things like Clyde and Fourth One that have been around a long time, are so successful. I mean, oddly, like Clyde and Fourth One are nearly at their sort of highest ever ratings. And you think, well, that shouldn't happen now, 40 years on. It's a really good radio market. So maybe STV think there's some opportunities there. But, competing with Global and Bauer and the BBC is pretty tough. And, STV launched the sort of small-scale TV stations in Glasgow, Edinburgh. They then closed. They've tried a few other things in sort of new products that haven't continued. So I'm kind of intrigued by it. They've got the right people, but it's not easy to do. So we will see. Okay, when we return, find out how this show made the dream of one particular comedy producer come true. I'll see you in a sec.
Hello Media Club listeners, Patrick here from Podcast Discovery, the podcast marketing company. This week we're coming to you from the Podcast Show in London, where we've been speaking about our cross-promo network, the virtual studio, and our listener-facing brand, Podcast Rex. For more info on those, or anything else to do with podcast marketing, head to podcastdiscovery.com. That's podcastdiscovery.com.
A lot of telechat on the show today, but what do the Media Club and your favourite chat shows have in common? Well, aside from sharp conversation and standout guests, both shows are filmed in top-tier studios. These days, people aren't just listening to their podcasts, they're watching them too. And thanks to Podshop, our show doesn't just sound great, it looks great as well. So whether you're just starting your podcast journey or a seasoned pro like us, Podshop's the ideal space for recording content that stands out from the crowd, so you can focus on the talking and leave the rest to the experts. And for a limited time, you can get 25% off your first booking here at Podshop Studios. Just use the code MEDIACLUB when booking online at podshoponline.co.uk. So don't miss out. Head to the studio page at podshoponline.co.uk and claim your 25% off. Welcome back. Before we rejoin Scott and Heather, here's what we've been discussing in the club this week. BBC Studios exec Zy Bennett has been busy since taking on the role just 6 months ago, restructuring the various entertainment and factual brands to become simply unscripted. Is this the kind of action that could give Bennett a chance to become the BBC's new Charlotte Moore? Watch this space. It was the Paul Foot Awards on Tuesday, with The Guardian taking the top prize for its blood-boiling investigation into the carers' allowance. Well done, particular to an alumnus of the show, Josh Halliday, who shares the spoils with Patrick Butler. And last week in the Media Club, you may remember John Holmes bemoaning an aria he'd won that's now propping open a fire door at the former studios at Power FM. Well, listener Simon Clark has been in touch to say he found it, and we can confirm that Holmes will soon be returned with the award. We're just here to make dreams come true.
I hope there's something to make sure that people can still leave via the fire exit.
Yes,
that's my main concern.
I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's
good.
fine.
Because I care about fire
safety first. Safety first.
Thank you.
Remember, links to all of the stories from the show are available on our free Substack. Just go to themediaclub.com. Themediaclub.com. Sign up and get an email from us every week. Scott and Heather are still with me. Now, just as we were editing the show last week, Gary Lineker was getting into another spot of bother online, reposting, deleting, and then apologising for an Instagram post. This proved a story too far for the BBC, which had Tim Davie that morning having to talk about these things as well. And the BBC said that he would present Match of the Day, but wouldn't front the World Cup coverage next year. Heather, there is non-stop Gary trouble. Have we just finally reached the end of the BBC's tether?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously this isn't the first time even that, Gary Lineker's come under fire for his social media posts. I think it was in 2023. He was suspended temporarily because of another post that he'd made on Twitter, and then, was reinstated and then also helped to write the guidelines for social media posts.
Yes, they're almost his guidelines he's broken.
Which he then appears to have broken again.
Yes.
So I think probably for the last 18 months, they've been kind of trying to have this relationship with Gary Lineker, and like the news that he's kind of stepping down is both unsurprising and somewhat surprising in that we knew that he would be coming, he would stop presenting Match of the Day at the end of this season, but there was an expectation that he would then go on to do the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of the, you've been a naughty boy, but you're coming off one, but we'll keep you on some other stuff. We'll put some of your things on BBC Sounds as well, your goal hanger shows.
Exactly. And actually, there was news that broke, I think, yesterday that since when I think it was announced on Monday that he would be formally kind of stepping away from the BBC, his podcast, The Rest is Football, is also now being dropped from BBC Sounds.
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
It is.
I think the rest is history sticking.
The rest is history is remaining. But BBC Sounds had originally signed a deal, I think in November of last year, that they would have the programme for a year and then with the possibility of being able to renew, but it seems they will now not be renewing. But they are still working with Goalhanger, which is Gary Lineker's company, because they are still going to have The Rest is History. But I think things that Gary Lineker presents are now kind of being shuffled off.
Yes. Scott, the BBC made sort of quite a big deal of his departure in the crazy way that they report on themselves. Also, there was that Amal Rajan interview sort of with him the other week as well. It's all got just messy.
It has got messy. I mean, I sort of feel, the BBC had no choice really, I think, in regards to what Gary Lineker did. So when I read the news that he was, leaving the organisation, the broadcaster, I wasn't that surprised really. I mean, sometimes I wonder just sort of how big these stories end up becoming rather than the other stories that we really should be having more focus on sometimes rather than some of these views. But I think it's just been the case that relations, by my pure speculative look, have not been great to where we are now. And also I could feel that with the new age that BBC Sport wants to make, with the new age of Match of the Day, having Gary on anyway, it sort of felt like that didn't feel like that was going to be a permanent thing. It sort of felt like you were putting somebody out to pasture.
I think
generally.
This has hastened his exit.
This has hastened an exit that I feel would have happened at some point in the next couple of years anyway. I guess it depends on whether another broadcaster decides to step up, whether firstly they have the football rights to, whether there would be enough space would pass for this storm to pass per se. And also what Gary wants to do, because of course he's been a very well paid presenter for the BBC for a number of years, but of course as we've been saying, does Goalhanger, which has been probably one of the most profitable and successful podcast companies in the UK. Yeah,
also I think The Rest is Football is a brand. He hasn't been able to maximise that brand because of his other commitments.
He will now.
And also as we come up to another...
They think it's all over. It is now, yeah.
A little sporting metaphor there.
The only one you'll ever get from me, may I say. Sorry for yelling.
But also coming up to a sort of World Cup, actually brand opportunities, YouTube shows,
crisps,
extra spin-offs. Actually, maybe he's not in a bad place.
No, I think he has enough kind of backing that he'll be. I think Gary Lineker will be just fine. But I think he knew that he'd probably taken it a step too far. But the fact that he was coming out and immediately apologising unreservedly meant that I think it was the minute that he apologised, which he should have done, the writing was on the wall.
Yeah. Okay, just enough time for the Audio Network Media Quiz. Let's see how much our guests...
sponsored?
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, close to our friends at the Audio Network.
I'm surprised by that. Love our sponsors. Feel free to record that again.
No, I won't. I will leave it in because we've drawn attention to it, which means extra value. Okay, let's see how much our guests have been paying attention to the media news this week. This week's quiz is called Partnershipped at First Sight.
Love it.
The media brands have been sized up and matchmaked against potential suitors this week. I'm going to give you the name of the brand. You simply tell me who they're in a new relationship with. And once again, Scott, Alex at Audio Network has taken this very small brief from producer Matt and come up with an entire suite of music to score today's game. Because that's what they do, Audio Network. They'll help you out with your music.
Why does it feel like a big lecture,
TV show. Okay, best of three. You buzz in with your name if you know the answer. So Scott, you will say.
Scott.
And Heather, you will say.
Heather.
Let's play Partnershipped at First Sight. Right. Question number one. I'm a commercially funded public service broadcaster that's tired of being tied to one platform. I want to play the field. And that field is audio apps that want to do more video.
Scott.
Oh, I think Scott just slightly ahead.
Is this with BBC Sounds and Rylan?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to throw it over to Heather.
Yes.
Heather.
This is Channel 4 joining Spotify for video content.
Correct.
Oh, yeah, of course, commercially funded. I'll let myself out.
Channel 4 is uploading its web-only content. So we talked about Channel 4.0 before. Stuff that's on YouTube is now going to exist on Spotify too.
Yeah, I think Channel 4 have been really, again, when we were talking about their digital presence earlier, they were the first ones to put digital video content on TikTok, on Snapchat. So I guess Spotify is the next kind of logical step in that. I now watch so many podcasts visually on Spotify.
But don't you find Spotify really annoying? Like the user interface is horrible.
Well, I think
it's like here's all the content from everywhere else all over again.
Well, I think
extending and minimising the video tab.
I think this is the interesting challenge for them. So what we would sort of regard as the podcast section now has things like Lab Bible originals in. It will have the Channel 4 originals in. So sort of what the kind of content is. Is it audio? Is it video? Is it all an amorphous mass? Well, I think that's sort of
I'm an Apple
where we're
Music
going.
subscriber.
Of course, if you're listening to us on Spotify, you can just swipe up the thing and watch the video of the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Does that mean you don't get Spotify Unwrapped every year?
What you get on Apple is something really similar. It's like Apple Replay.
Okay. Is it a
And
slightly
you get
rubbish
it 2 days earlier than Spotify, and it's also about 30% more shit. So it's fine. But also, like, sorry, side note. Who cares? Who cares? Oh, I listen to this song loads. Who cares? And every year, everyone does it, including myself with my own replay. But you know.
I love looking over people's Spotify.
Really?
I think it's so. I have a friend who has totally unhinged ones every year that
Unhinged
I genuinely
ones?
look forward to. It's like Birmingham City football chants and stuff as though it's top 5.
Incredible.
I love watching.
Well, the smart speaker use in our household skews my Spotify
Of course.
Wrapped, which is annoying.
And how has it skewed it? What sort of content?
My wife's Keep Fit content, what she listens to while she does that, means that my high quality music is diluted by that work.
So like the top thing on it is like 30 minutes of yoga.
Yes.
It's the most listened to moment of the whole year. Brilliant.
And you can see that on my Instagram story in December. Okay.
Just scroll up.
Right, question number 2. I'm a national treasure with a new podcast looking for something more than a traditional audio
Rylan, BBC Sound, Scott. Rylan, so I did see the release of this, so hence why I thought it was going to be up. As in a partnership with BBC Sounds. So basically, his new podcast, I think, How to Be in Love, which follows the successful How to Be a Man. And it's so an obvious thing, I'm surprised that no other podcast on BBC Sound slate has done it before. It's going to be visualised and be put on iPlayer.
Yes, so it's going to be on both platforms on BBC
Which makes
Sound
total sense because YouTube, I forgot who it was who told me this, so I'm really bad, but somebody said to me that they now get more viewers through podcasts that have been uploaded onto YouTube than they actually do via audio now. And I think it's just the fact that has just been for trend. I mean, this is hello. This is filmed, and that's the standard now. And I just think, it's even like Sidetracked, which is the Annie Mac and Nick Grimshaw podcast. They film things, so it makes sense to put the whole thing up rather than clips. So
I think there's probably an interesting BBC discussion about who owns iPlayer and who owns Sounds and how well that's connected.
Well, I think there was another commission, I don't know if it was this week or last week, which is Tom Grennan and is it Roman Kemp?
Yes.
It is, yeah.
By the 5 Live team, I think.
Which is another, kind of chatty podcast that's then, I think that one's going to be visualised as well. Maybe I'm wrong. But, I mean, The Traitors Uncloaked just did so well on BBC Two that it just makes sense to keep ploughing that forward.
Also interesting whether BBC Sounds itself has video in or whether it's send everybody to iPlayer. I'm sure that's an interesting internal discussion that they have. Right, question number 3. As one of the oldest podcast companies in the UK, I've been taking my time to find the perfect match, and now I found it. This is a company called Fresh Air.
Oh, is this the one with, are they called Inflective Media?
Inflective Group, yes. Give half a point for that.
Still beats me.
Sneak past.
Fresh Air, kind of one of the original podcast producers, has been acquired by an investment firm, and sort of they're bringing together lots of different media companies in one, the Inflective Group. It seems a good fit, giving a back end, giving support for a new company. Is that a good thing for a podcast firm to do?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think podcasting is still a media that has had ups and downs over the last 20 years, but it's still, when it works, can be incredibly lucrative. And I think also it's at a time of just bringing on new talent and putting them onto other media.
And Heather, that makes you our winner. Congratulations, first time.
Yay.
Scott, very disappointing. You're
very disappointing. Not just disappointing, very.
You're here quite regularly, the format of the quiz.
Wow. And you think I've got a great track record of winning the quiz on every other episode. May I just say, rewind and hear my various terrible opportunities.
Well, as a special prize, Heather, you can get this podcast put on BBC iPlayer. So if you can just talk to our contacts, you can get us following
I'll make some
Riley.
calls.
My thanks to Scott Bryan and Heather Fallon, and of course to Alex at Audio Network for this week's Suite of Music. And remember, they can do this for your next project too. Just head to audionetwork.com. Heather, how can people keep up with your work?
So I'm a reporter on broadcast. So if you type my name into broadcast, or you can follow me on Twitter, I'm Heather Fallon with 2 N's because Heather Fallon was already taken.
Who's Heather Fallon 1?
I don't know, because I googled Heather Fallon and I cannot find another Heather Fallon. Just my username was taken.
So once I had a group started up on Twitter. Oh, no, wait, it was Instagram. And it was somebody who brought together all the Scott Bryans. And they were like, let's meet up and have a fight.
Oh, my God. I think if you did that with all the Heather Fallons in the world, there'd be like 3 of us. I think the other 2 are in America.
Yeah, quite a lot of it. Same way with Joe Lighter going to all the Birmingham. So we're revisiting all the Scott Bryans. That's not what I'm promoting,
Well, I was going to say, when you're not fighting all the other Scott Bryans, how
fighting my own namesake,
I
can be found at Scotty GB. I'm trying to think. Oh yes, I'm on Must Watch on 5 Live every Monday, where we review a lot of TV, and you can listen to that on BBC Sounds, but they don't visualise it
yet.
Dot.
And can people pre-order the book yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
And it's not publicly announced.
Okay. Even though you did it earlier. Right. Thank you both. And thank you for watching as well. Scott laughs in the background. And thank you for watching as well. Remember, go to the Substack and themediaclub.com. Sign up for that. My name is Matt Deegan. It was a Rethink audio production with video support from Podcast Discovery. And the producer was Matt Hill. We'll see you next week.